And the track goes long. Or not. Sedate through. How are y'all doing? Take a vote. On a scale of 1 to infinity, how are y'all?
1.
Okay. Sorry I asked. I realize you've never seen anything like this before, so this is totally new for you. Boy, y'all write slow. It doesn't have to be perfect, like symmetry and everything. You don't have to color it in. Okay? I mean, you're not going to sell it on eBay later, so it's not that kind of deal. Perfection is not the goal. Hey, yeah, pictures, that's even better. I am all in favor of technology. Take a picture. That's good. I should just take pictures and stuff and post it online. That would be the best. I think I'll do that. Okay, so how's this working for y'all?
Good.
Like a well-oiled machine, or y'all just kind of, what is that? Say what? Okay, so let me just do this for you. Okay? Let me just walk through this, just as it is right now. Before I do that, your second essay focuses specifically within the executive branch of government. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So when I refer to the bureaucracy, I am talking about the agencies and departments created in the executive branch of government, responsible specifically for creating outcomes. Yeah. Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy refers to the agencies and departments within the executive branch responsible for producing outcomes. They implement, they regulate, they administer. That's what they do. They implement, they regulate, they administer. The bureaucracy in the state government of Texas implements, regulates, and administers, which means they create outcomes. Okay, outputs. Elected officials, appointed officials, outputs. Bureaucrats, unelected officials within the agencies and departments of the bureaucracy of the state government of Texas, outcomes. They are responsible for actually putting into effect, doing what's created by the legislative branch of government and by elected officials in the executive branch. Does that make sense to you? They are the doers. All right? How's that working for y'all? Okay, so here's the deal. Your textbook makes it seem as if this is the way politics and policy and the process unfolds in the state of Texas. This is the way your textbook makes it seem. The political process in the state of Texas appears to look like this. How's that working for you? Okay? What I am questioning is whether this is actually the way it works. Okay? Within the chapter 8, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 8. The Texas Executive Branch. Within that chapter, this is the way it appears to look until you get to the very end of the chapter. And at the end of the chapter, basically the last paragraph of the chapter 8 calls this into question. And the evil SOBs just kind of threw that in there and then moved into chapter 9, which is not particularly fair. Okay? And because we are political science majors here and we have inquisitive minds, we're not going to let this drop. Okay? Somebody talk to me. That was awesome. That was great. I'm beginning to take this personally. Okay, so here's the way the textbook makes it appear. The political process. Problems, right? Okay. Problems affect political actors outside government. Political actors outside government take their demands in the form of what?
Lobbying, protests.
No hands. Political actors outside government who are being affected by problems take their demands or inputs to elected officials in government, expecting a what? A response. Well done. It's a fun game. Expecting a response. Which is what I expect all the time in here, and basically just that is just unfulfilled on my part. What to do? They expect a response. Okay, and in the legislative branch of government, by God, they get a response. It's called legislation. In the executive branch, they also get a response. In your textbook, the response comes from elected officials who have to respond because they're afraid to not be reelected. They have to respond. Okay? All right? And in your textbook, it seems that those are the basic connections between political actors outside government and political actors inside government. It's basically a relationship between elected officials and political actors outside government. Okay? Okie dokies? How's that working for y'all? Okay. Which means that the unelected bureaucrats, the unelected governmental officials who do the outcomes, basically just follow orders. Here, go do this. All right? They don't have a lot of discretion. They basically just do what they're told, which is the rational actor model. Here, go do this. All right? They basically exhibit what's called instrumental thinking. They're tools. Okay? So think of the 170 plus agencies of the exhibit. Did I just lose you? Where did I lose you?
Rational actor model.
Okay. So this, all right? This is basically the idea that unelected bureaucrats in the Texas government have very little discretion. Okay? They exist in Max Weber's world in hierarchies where they are neutrally competent, where they do what they're told. Okay? They exhibit instrumental thinking. And if you don't have one of these, I gave these out yesterday, so I have those copies of this. All right? And this is Brian Cook. They just exhibit instrumental thinking. Okay? Linear, orderly, sequential. They do what they're told. They don't don't got to think about it. They just do what they're told. How's that working for y'all? Okay? Demands, responses, tools. Okay? How are we doing? Does that make sense to you? Okay. But here's the deal. In the last chapter of the book, of chapter 8, in chapter 8, in the last paragraph of chapter 8, the dispersal of power and authority among a number of different executive offices in the state has a third consequence for democracy in the state. Additional points of access are created for interest groups seeking to influence government and public policy. Additional points of access are created. It's not just this is the point. There are additional points of access. Ladies and gentlemen, this, the legislative branch of government, elected officials, this is a point of access. The governor's office is a point of access. Does that make sense? You can go to the governor of the state of Texas and communicate with the governor. You can go to the lieutenant governor. You can go to your elected representatives in the Senate and the House of Representatives and the state legislature. You can talk to them. But chapter 8 makes it appear that bureaucrats are insulated, kept at a distance from you. They are not the agencies of the bureaucracy are not thought of as points of access. They're just the doers. Just don't get in their way. Just let them do what they're supposed to do. They are not considered points of access. But here's the question. What if they are? Okay? In the last paragraph of your book, of chapter 8, there is the hint that there are additional points of access. Well, what the hell does that mean? It means the agencies and departments of the bureaucracy. You can actually go to the unelected officials and talk to them. Okie doke? They're not off limits. Okay? So if you can go talk to bureaucrats, if bureaucrats are points of interest, of access, the unelected officials, the 300,000 plus unelected bureaucrats in the executive branch, if those agencies and departments are points of access as well, is it possible that bureaucrats have more discretion than we think they do? It's a three-letter word. It begins with a Y, it ends with an S, and it has an E in the middle. I'll wait. Okay? Well, this is your essay. This is what I'm trying to get you to see in your essay. Okay? All right. So, let's just assume for a second that the agencies and departments of the bureaucracy of the executive branch actually are points of access. Let's include into the mix let's include everybody in the executive branch as a point of access. Let's not just look at the elected officials, let's look at everybody as a point of access. Okay? How's that working for you? Okay? What if it's not the way it appears to be? What if bureaucrats, unelected officials, actually have more discretion than we think they do? What if control is not as effective as we think it is? Understand the question? Look, your textbook says very clearly that the legislative branch of government controls unelected bureaucrats in the executive branch. Okay? And it does that in two ways. Well, three ways. One is the budget. Right? I mean, if you want a paycheck, it basically is logical that you're not going to piss off the people who give you the paycheck, and that's the legislative branch of government. So, budget. The Sunset Review Commission. All right? Every 12 years, your agency of the government gets reviewed by the legislature. It's basically the Sunset Review Commission, and this is in your textbook. This is in chapter 8. Okay, this is not some sort of magic here. It's in your textbook. The Sunset Review Commission is a committee in the legislative branch of government that reviews the agencies of the government. The agencies of the government basically have to sit there and say, this is why I need funding. This is why you need to not kill my agency. All right? It's a justification. The bureaucrats go to the legislative branch of government and justify their existence. Okie dokie? So, the budget, the Sunset Review Commission, and the Texas APA. The Texas APA. What'd that be? The Texas APA stands for the Texas Administrative Procedure Act. Administrative Procedure Act. ACT. Administrative Procedure Act. The Texas APA is legislation. It's an output. Okay? It is designed specifically to limit the discretion of unelected officials. When they make rules.
To limit?
Huh?
You said to limit?
Yeah. To limit discretion when bureaucrats make rules. The APA, Texas APA, is a piece of legislation designed specifically to limit the discretion of bureaucrats when they make rules. doke? How's that working for you? And I'll get to the rule thing in a second here. I'm getting to this. Just give me a second. Okay? So what I've done is I've now expanded the capacity of bureaucrats. Bureaucrats not just create outcomes, they also have the ability to create rules. Okay? How's that working for you? So I'm making the process more complex here. I'm providing more opportunity for discretion for bureaucrats. And I'm calling into question this whole control thing. Right? If your textbook had just left out that last paragraph, we wouldn't have to do any of this stuff. You should write a nasty email to the authors of your textbook. You sorry sons of bitches, you put in that paragraph and look at the misery you have caused me. Yeah, you should do that. If I were you, I'd have done that already. I would. This guy picks one paragraph out of the chapter and makes my life miserable. Thanks a lot. I don't know who to hate more, the authors of your textbook or me. I don't know how that. Okay, but you're with me here for just, okay, have I lost anybody? You tell me, right? Legislative control. Elected officials appoint the heads of the agencies. Control. These people report to these people. Therefore, these people report to these people who report to these people. Control. These people are accountable to, in theory, the people who elected them, the political actors outside government. See the accountability? See the control? Control. Control, down. Control, oversight. And oversight is just another word for review. Control, oversight, control. Control, oversight, same damn thing. Okie doke? How's that working for you? All right? Okay? But what I've done here is I've explained, without explaining it, why that last paragraph in chapter 8 exists. That last paragraph in chapter 8 exists because bureaucrats, unelected officials, have the capacity to make rules. Okie doke? How's that working for you? Okay, does everyone have this? Well, yes, what? No. You sure? Why did you do it? That would be awesome. If I just gave half the room one of these and the other half something different, that'd be great. I think I want to do that one day.
See if they notice.
Well, no, I just see what happens. It's like a sociological experiment.
Just like supply the same information, just worded differently.
Yeah, just in different format. That would be awesome. I think I will do that. No, really, that sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Sounds like a waste of time. Why
No,
do two
it-
things?
Huh?
Why do something twice?
You're way too practical.
Keep it simple. Stupid.
Thanks so much for that last part. What? Yeah. How much fun is that?
Plenty.
Shut up, David. Just give me what I need to get out of this course. Let's move on. God, I'm being repressed. My creativity is being channeled into narrower and narrower.
You're being controlled.
I am being forced to play
It's all
inside the
fake
box.
though, there's no control, it's all fake.
It's all fake. It's all an illusion. Okay, let's talk about rules here for a second. Rules are not an illusion. Rationally. Let's just talk rationally here for a second. Logically. Is it logical should it be? Is it logical for somebody to think through the steps before they act? Is this a good thing?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is why rules exist. Rules exist because we just assume that governmental officials are not just going to do stuff, that they will actually create steps before they do things. Okey-doke? Does that make sense to you? So, at the bottom of this, these are all the same. At the bottom of this, there's a definition of rules. Rules help bureaucrats do such things as formulate a plan, to implement legislation, regulate. Okey-doke? They're just a set of steps that help bureaucrats figure out where they're going. Okay? Rulemaking. A process used by bureaucratic departments and agencies leading to the creation of rules that provide an understanding of existing legislation. Okay? A rule is designed to help bureaucrats understand what they're supposed to do. These are the steps necessary to take to produce outcomes. Rules help bureaucrats create the steps necessary to produce outcomes. Okay, the legislative branch of government says do this. The governor says do this. The appointed head of the agency says do this. Okey-doke. But that's all they tell them. It's up to the bureaucrat to figure out the steps necessary to do what they're told to do. That's called making rules. Here's the question. Two questions. One, does making rules involve discretion? And the answer is yes. And does making rules provide for additional points of access? And the answer is yes. Okay? How's that working for y'all? We good? Okay? How we doing? Talk to me. Don't want to talk. Anybody have a question?
So we're supposed to get 3 pages from just chapter 8? Okay.
It's easy to do.
Yeah. Okay.
How we doing here? Has anybody got a question so far? Give me 20 minutes and I'll turn to the essay. But just, does anyone have a question about where I am right now? Instead of physically, geographically standing in front of you, the concept of rules so far. So what I want to do is look at two things here. One is I want to look at the ability of bureaucrats to make rules. And two, I want to look at a concept from Herbert Simon. So, the concept, remember Herbert Simon? I gave you a definition of an organization from Herbert Simon. Remember that? Sort of remember that?
Yeah.
Vague recollection of that? Herbert Simon? Herbert Simon. Oh, I actually want to do three things. I want to do three things. Rules, Simon, and Lipsky. And the other day I gave you a handout for Michael Lipsky. I want to talk through Michael Lipsky. Okay? All right. Do you remember the definition of an organization from Herbert Simon? I'm not asking you, did you memorize it? I'm just asking if you got it somewhere. We're good? Anybody confused about the definition of an organization from Herbert Simon? An organization refers to the complex pattern of communications and other relations in a group of human beings, right? How are we doing with this?
Good.
Okay. Communications and other relations in a group of human beings, all right? In the very same book that the definition comes from, Herbert Simon makes an observation about people in organizations. And Simon argues that people in organizations, and he's talking about bureaucrats here, basically unelected officials, inevitably, bureaucrats responsible for rules and outcomes. Bureaucrats responsible for rules and outcomes. Inevitably. Satisfies. Inevitably. Okay, Jeff? How's that working for you? Okay, it's not what you think it is. So it's in your best interest to ask me what satisficing means. Well done, thank you. Look, satisfice is not a real word. It's a made-up word. Herbert Simon. So Simon took two words. He spliced them together to make up this word. Satisfy and suffice. Satisfy and suffice. Satisfice. Okay? How's it working for you? How can I satisfy a demand with the minimum requirements? Satisfice. How can I satisfy a demand with the minimum. Not maximum, minimum. Okay? Satisfies. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I realize that you've never done this, but I satisfice all the time. Because I have more than one thing to do at any given moment. So, because I have a number of things to do, nobody puts a priority on any of it. Everybody just assumes that what they give me is high priority. So I have to take everything that I have to do, and I have to make some choices. Okay, fine. If everybody wants me to do everything and have it done at the same time, that's not going to happen. So I'm not going to be able to be perfect. I'm not going to be able to complete the assignment and to a high degree of excellence. Oh, hell no. All I want to do is get it off my desk. How do I make the task go away? I have things to do. I've got lots of stuff to do. I have deadlines. Okay. How do I meet the deadlines and still eat and sleep and have a life?
Hand it out to other people.
Huh?
Hand it out to other people.
I can do that. And guess how happy they're going to be?
Not very.
Not very. But I will do that. I'll do whatever it takes to make it go away. I am not in the, I gave up a long time ago on overall excellence. I'm not after excellence. I'm not after high praise. I'm just after, please God, make it go away. Okay? Well, inevitably, people have more things to do than they can do. Resort to satisficing. Find a method to make the task disappear. Okie doke? You guys do it in here. You do. And I know you do this. It's just the way people in organizations function. You have essays to do, right? Okay. How can I make this essay go away and make David minimally happy? Okie doke? No, yeah, you do. How can I do this? Because I have other things to do. How do I get this essay off my list of responsibilities and not have David freak out?
A minimum of 5 pages.
And that's what you do. You look inside for some way out. And you see that word maximum? Well, it starts with an M, it ends with an M. Has the same number of letters as minimal, right? And you immediately go, that's it. Okay, when I do that, I'm done. Okay, Dad? Anything extra? Anything over that page limit, right? Anything over that page limit that I have put in there, the minimum page limit, anything over that, well, that's just extra. If I have time, I'll do it. But if I don't have time, I've got the minimum.
But even if you have time, you don't do it.
Huh?
Even if you have time, you don't do it.
No, and that's what happens to most of us, because there's always something else that we got to do. Okay, I'm at the minimum. What the hell more do you want? Right? Well, not you guys. Those guys. All right?
We're on political science things.
See there? You live for these moments. I get that, and I appreciate it. But not everybody does that. And I damn sure don't do that. I mean, I gave up on that a long time ago. After doing this for 32 years, I gave up on that like 2 years in. Hell with that. Okay? That's why I basically resorted to student abuse. Makes me happy. All right? So, look, bureaucrats are not in the business of producing outcomes based on overall excellence. They have jobs to do, and they're simply trying to do their job. Okay? On the other hand, they're also responsible for creating rules. Okay, and I need to talk about that for like 5 minutes here. Oh, here it is. Some of you are going to get a double dose of this. This guy, Kerwin, Cornelius Kerwin. If you go into a university library and look in the public policy section of the library, you will see a row of books on rulemaking. There's book after book after book on rulemaking. Kerwin's book on rulemaking is one of the better books. How government agencies write law and make policy. Well, this book is about how bureaucrats use the APA, the guidelines for the APA, when they make rules. Okay? So Kerwin walks people through the process of using the APA making rules. Okay? What's the APA in theory designed to do?
Limit discretion.
Limit the discretion of bureaucrats when they make rules. Okay? That was what it was designed to do. Okay, in the 1940s, don't write this down. In the 1940s, the United States Congress created a piece of legislation called the Administrative Procedure Act, the APA. After the 1940s, every single state has created its own version of the U.S. APA. So Texas has a version of the Congress's APA. Does that make sense to you? Texas does, North Dakota does, Hawaii does, Rhode Island does, all states have an APA. Here's the deal. In the Texas APA, the Texas legislature took the definition of a rule directly from the APA, the federal APA, Congress's APA. So the definition of a rule is the very same definition in the national APA and the Texas APA. We're good to go? Okay, I have provided you with the definition of a rule from the APA. Good? How we doing?
Good.
Does that make sense to you? Okay, so you now have the official definition of a rule right in front of you. It comes directly from the APA. Fortunately, I didn't have to go. It's not that hard to find. With me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
He said he won't do that, not today.
Here's the definition of a rule. Does that make any sense to you? Okay, I'll be honest with you. Every time I read this, my initial response is, I have absolutely no idea what that means. Okay, look at this. Look at the definition of a rule. A rule means everything or some part of an agency's statement of, well, we're not quite sure, or something really specific that we can apply, which might have some future effect that we're not even sure about, designed to I'm sorry, that is beyond me. I mean, you might as well just pick out a Ouija board and say, okay, fine, use this to make your rule. I mean, hey, let's talk to dead people. Maybe they'll help. I have no idea. Okay? If this could be, ladies and gentlemen, that could be anything. Hey. Everything? Something? Kinda, sorta? Very specific. Maybe it's in the future. Who knows? And it's all designed to help them implement, interpret, prescribe. Okay. Here is the problem. One of the problems, ladies and gentlemen. People who wrote this were like on drugs. I have no idea what they were doing. You would think this was the 1960s when they wrote this, but it wasn't. Okay, so here's the deal. The APA was designed for what purpose? Limit the discretion of bureaucrats when they make rules which are designed to help them produce outcomes. How complicated is this? Well, apparently pretty damn complicated. Okay, so if the APA only said rules are designed to help bureaucrats implement law or policy, and by law I mean legislation. By policy I mean what elected officials basically tell them to do. Like the governor says, hey, go do that. Okay? If the APA said rules are designed to help bureaucrats implement law or policy, everything would be fine. That's control. I know exactly what's going on. I have no it's not that big a deal. But that's not what it says. Implement. It also allows bureaucrats to interpret, prescribe. Okay? As soon as I move to interpret, what have I just given bureaucrats?
Discretion.
The power of discretion. Does that make sense to you? Yes? Yes. Let me just read this to you. This is Curley. Some of you are going to hear this twice, but okay, this is Curley. The definition of a rule clearly establishes an expansive relationship between rules, law, and public policy. The terms implement, interpret, and prescribe describe the fullest range of influence that a rule can have. It also explains how much discretion bureaucrats have. Rules are designed to help bureaucrats implement when legislation is fully developed. Totally understandable. Okay? Look, if legislation is fully developed, totally understandable, then all I have to do is come up with a couple of simple rules that will help me when I create outcomes. I don't have any questions. I know exactly what the legislative branch of government wanted me to do. It's right there in the legislation. Boy, howdy, they spelled everything out. I have no questions. All right? So, if I get it, if it's complete and total and explainable and understandable and I know exactly what they're saying to me, then I make very simple, straightforward rules. I'm not using a whole lot of discretion. I'm just implementing. I'm just doing what they tell me to do. Here, David, go do those 5 things. And all I have to do is go, okay, fine, I'm going to do those 5 things. Totally cool, no problems. All right? Rules interpret when law and policy are well established but confront unanticipated or changing circumstances. When the world changes, when something unanticipated happens, when things you weren't considering, like the future, suddenly gets in your way, all of a sudden you are forced to interpret this new unanticipated thing not covered in legislation. All right? In the state of Texas, state wildlife officials and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality are now confronting an unforeseen world that nobody anticipated. It's a world of invasive species. We've got in our streams and in our rivers and increasingly in our lakes, we've got aquarium people have, we've imported fish into the state of Texas to clean our aquariums, placostomus, from South America. And they get too big for the aquarium and people just have dumped them out into the streams. Well, we now have South American fish swimming around in our streams and in our rivers. We've got flora and fauna from South America and Central America. Off the coast, we have lionfish, saltwater fish that come from the Pacific Ocean that like it here. We've got all sorts of, in the Florida Everglades, for example, and increasingly in the state of Texas, we've got all sorts of fish and snakes. We've got 20-foot boa constrictors in the Florida Everglades. Okay, that's not the way it's supposed to be. So we've got an invasion of foreign species that nobody foresaw. Well, there's no legislation. Legislation is catching up. Well, okay, fine, in this world of invasive species, you've got bureaucrats who have to deal with this. They have to deal with this. From Colorado comes a wasting disease. From the Rocky Mountains comes a wasting disease that gets transmitted to deer. Well, okay, fine, we've got this in elk and deer in the Rocky Mountain states. Well, that's migrated into the state of Texas. Why? Because ranchers have gone to Colorado, where the deer are bigger, trapped the deer, transported them back to Texas. Those deer have been infected with the wasting disease, so now we have it in the state of Texas. Okay? So these are unforeseen things that bureaucrats have to negotiate. I got to deal with this. State legislature doesn't have legislation that tells me what to do. Look, my father was the state epidemiologist, and he's a veterinarian, but he was the state epidemiologist in the state of Texas. And my dad was responsible in the early 1980s for literally trying to figure out how to deal with an AIDS explosion in the state prison system. That's what epidemiologists do. So he had no clue how to do this because he's a veterinarian to begin with. And so he had to go get trained by the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta to then come back and try to figure out how to deal with an AIDS epidemic in the state prisons. Okay, well, nobody said, there were no guidelines for him. The state legislature didn't have guidelines. Nobody knew how to do this. Does that make sense to you? He had to do this by himself. So what he's doing is interpreting this world that there's no guidelines for. So he basically just did it himself. Okay, so that's what interpreting means. It's also kind of what prescribing means. So here's Kerwin. Rules prescribe when Congress establishes the goals of law, but provides few details about how to put them into effect. Have you ever read legislation? Oh my God, it's the most frustrating thing in the universe. It's like, what the hell are they talking about? If you read legislation, there are these huge gaps in it. It could mean this, it could mean that. We're really not sure what we're talking about. So when bureaucrats get legislation in TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, THECB, when THECB gets a piece of legislation crafted by our members of the Senate and the House and signed into law by the governor, they read it and they go, I have no idea what y'all are talking about. Totally clueless. I have no idea what you want me to do. I have no idea what you're talking about. This doesn't make any sense to me at all. And that's the way legislation is. Legislation is created in broad strokes. It's very general. Very little specific in it. General, big ideas. And why do they do that? Because they turn to the bureaucrats, the experts, to figure it out. Here, this is what we want you to do. But we're not going to tell you exactly how to do it because we don't know how to do it. Here, you go figure it out. Now really, that literally does make some sense to me. The legislative branch of government, these are not experts. They're just simply responding to inputs. So, do you want legislators who are basically not experts to basically tell the experts what to do? No, you don't. So literally it makes some sense to me for legislators to not be specific, but be general, to allow the bureaucrats to actually do it, figure it out themselves. I would much rather have an expert figure this out than some elected official in the legislative branch of government to do this. I was polite, right? So let them prescribe. Let them create a prescription. I'm the expert. I'm going to figure this out for myself. Thank you very much for just telling me what direction to go in and allowing me to use my discretion to figure out how I'm going to do this. Okie doke? So my point is the ability to make rules provides the ability for an expanded amount of discretion. It also provides political actors outside government to try to inform and influence the bureaucrats. Does that make sense to you? Look, if I want to influence government, why should I just go to the legislative branch? Why can't I just go to the people who are making the rules that are going to produce the outcomes? Those are the people I really need to talk to, because they're the ones who are actually doing stuff. They're the ones who are interpreting and prescribing. They're the ones who are actually doing. Everybody wants to go to their elected officials. I want you to go to the bureaucrat, because the bureaucrat is the one who's actually going to affect your life. Go talk to the bureaucrat. Right? They got their agencies and departments have websites. They've got telephone numbers. All you got to do is figure out a telephone number and call them. They'll be happy to talk to you. You do? How's it working for you? My point is that very last paragraph in chapter 8 opens the door through the APA to an expanded understanding of the power of discretion by bureaucrats. One little paragraph in that chapter opens the door and provides a real look at how much discretion bureaucrats actually possess. And bureaucrats possess a lot more discretion than you think they do. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So, my bad. Okay, your textbook basically assumes that the bureaucracy in the executive branch of the state government of Texas is just a form of organization. Okay? How's that working for you? I'm asking you to look in the textbook and look at chapter 8, basically, and explore chapter 8 of your textbook. What does your textbook talk about in terms of the bureaucracy? The executive branch and the bureaucracy. Okay? Does that make sense to you? You got an entire chapter to do this with. All right? Okay, do? All right? And in the conclusion, I'm asking you to look at the last paragraph in chapter 8. An expanded understanding of discretion. Okay? Here's your textbook. Your textbook talks about the structure of bureaucracy, talks about control of bureaucrats. That's chapter 8. Okay? All right? But in here, we've questioned the control over bureaucrats, right? And in here, I gave you a way of thinking about bureaucrats linked to your textbook, starting with Max Weber, right? We talked about Max Weber, right? And Max Weber's idea about the structure of bureaucracy, control, limited discretion, neutral competence, right? Just say yes. Okay? All right? I went through Frederick Taylor a little bit, right? We want efficiency, right? Control, lack of discretion, efficiency. We want things to function in a linear, orderly, sequential manner. Okay, we don't want bureaucrats running around making it up themselves. Oh no, we don't. That would be no fun. Right? Handing out different copies of the same thing. That would be bad.
Maybe we can put it in like a different order and it's still the same thing. You wouldn't waste too much of your time. I'm just saying it's a waste.
Hey, Morning.
I have a question.
Be nice. What?
You didn't go over that guy's paper you were going to.
Okay.
Lipsky.
Oh,
Sorry,
no, that's fine. Thank you.
Sorry.
And, okay, so, you got the textbook? Okay, can you do that? Let's do chapter 8. All right? Okay, so, if I look inside the concept of a rule and recognize that a rule tells me that bureaucrats have the ability through rules not just to interpret reality, but to not just to implement, but to interpret and prescribe, right? Now I have opened the door to discretion, and this is Michael Lipsky's world. Lipsky. Remember Michael Lipsky, back in the up until the late 1970s, when social scientists looked at organizations, bureaucratic organizations, the assumption was structure controlled behavior. We just assumed that bureaucrats didn't have a lot of discretion. But Lipsky is one of the first social scientists to actually question that assumption. All right? I'm going to assume that bureaucrats have limited discretion. Now Michael Lipsky comes along and questions that assumption. And what Lipsky finds when he actually communicates, talks to the bureaucrats, goes directly to the bureaucrats and interviews them, what he finds is that bureaucrats exist in a world that is not as controlled as we think it is. Look, I have a dean, a supervisor, who's supposed to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Oversight, control. Well, I like my dean. He's a great guy, does a great job. Happy, happy, happy. But guess how often I see him? Well, I haven't seen him at all this summer. I mean, I know he's around, I get an occasional email, but I don't see him. And during a regular semester, I see him maybe 2-3 times. Okay, ain't nobody oversight, ain't nobody walking around here checking in, looking to make sure that this is going the way it's supposed to. Or maybe somebody just happens to be walking down the hall and they go, oh look, there's David. I mean, he must be in class, who knows? Either that or he just wandered into a group of people and started talking and they feel compelled to just sit there and listen. I don't know what's going on in there. Sounds like political science, okay. And my dean is not a political scientist. He's a sociologist. Sort of kind of the same, but not really. So he understands about every third word that I say. And I understand about every third word he says. So we communicate really well. Okay? Well, the point is that we assume that oversight is not occasional, not sort of kind of, but it's continual. Lipsky comes along and says, no, it don't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. Elected officials, control appointed officials. Appointed officials control bureaucrats. It doesn't work that way. Appointed officials got other stuff to do. They're not looking over your shoulder all the time. I don't feel compelled to look around to see if anybody's sort of checking up on me, because I know they're not. I figured that out a long time ago, which is why I sort of kind of do political science. Stand-up comedy, political science, basically the same thing. You know what I mean? I always wanted to be a comedian, and this is my chance. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a little bitty piece of Robin Williams in everyone. So, well, hold on. No oversight. Okay. So Lipsky says A, oversight is not consistent. And B, bureaucrats are overworked. They got too much to do. So guess what they resort to?
Minimum.
They satisfice. They just tried to get by. Okay? They satisfice. That's Michael Lipsky. Okay? Lipsky is important because Lipsky argues that all of that control and all of the mechanisms that we have in place that we think control the behavior of bureaucrats really don't work all that well. Okay? How's that working for you? All right? We're good? Sort of good? Kind of good? Look, what I'm asking you to do, all I'm asking you to do is two things. One, I'm simply asking you to look at chapter 8 of your book and try to understand what the authors are telling you. All right? Principally, the authors are telling you that within the executive branch of government, there are these agencies and departments responsible for producing outcomes. All right? Your textbook, chapter 8, spends most of its time looking at, within the executive branch of government, the elected officials and the appointed officials. That's the majority of chapter 8. Okay, so in chapter 8, which is more important? Elected officials and appointed officials, or unelected officials? Well, where is the weight in the chapter? Huh? Well, okay, but don't take that out of the equation. The authors of your textbook spend the majority of time looking at elected officials and appointed officials, and very little attention until the very end of the chapter looking at the unelected officials and the agencies and departments. Okay, so which is more important to them? In the executive branch, the elected officials and the appointed officials are more important because they have the power of discretion. And the authors of your textbook basically assume bureaucrats do not. So we don't have to deal with them that much. They're just not that important. Got bureaucrats, no problem. Control. Oversight. Okay, your textbook Chapter 8 focuses almost exclusively on the role of elected officials and appointed officials. There's not a lot of emphasis to bureaucrats. Why? Because they assume that bureaucratic behavior is controlled. We don't have to worry about it. And then, at the very end of the chapter, you got that one paragraph. Okay? And that paragraph opens the door for the discussion that we have had in here about the discretionary capacity of bureaucrats. We assume that bureaucrats exist in a controlled environment. We assume that the formal rules control their behavior. We assume that oversight is absolute. We assume that they are neutrally competent experts. They merely do their job. We assume that they have almost no discretion at all. That's your textbook. Besides for one paragraph in chapter 8. And in that one paragraph, all of that chapter is called into question. Okey-doke? That leads you into this in-class discussion, right? That looks at the Texas APA, the definition of a rule. Okay? Make sense to you? Where you can actually then go into the conclusion and say, wait a second. I mean, I get what the textbook says, but it might not actually be that way. Bureaucrats may have more discretion than we think, and that is principally because of the definition of a rule in the Texas APA. Okay? Why do bureaucrats, in reality, have more discretionary capacity than we think they do? Because they have the ability to make rules. And within the definition of a rule, you've got the reason why they have discretion. Rules are not just designed to implement, they help bureaucrats interpret and prescribe. And there you go. Okay? How's that working for you? Those of you who were... No, I'll do that later. I was going to think through the 2305 thing, but let me think about that for a second. How y'all doing? In the process of goodification, where are we going? Good. Does anybody got a question? Are you sure? I'm not asking you for quantum mechanics here, but you're going to have to look at that chapter in the book, and you're going to have to understand the executive branch of government in the state of Texas as it's laid out in the book. One more time, the emphasis in that chapter is on the elected officials, sort of kind of on the appointed officials, not really at all on the bureaucrats. My argument to you is that we should, that chapter should have gone through the elected officials, the appointed officials, and spent way more time on bureaucrats. Because bureaucrats have way more discretionary capacity than we think they do. And that is principally because of the definition of a rule in the Texas APA. If that definition was not there, I would be totally fine with your chapter and your book. Be okay with that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that definition is the same one from the federal government too, and is that like the same for all states? They all
Yes.
have that same
It's the
exact,
same, yep,
like what no state took out, like
It's the
in
same.
all of it.
it's the same. And that provides continuity, and basically it provided a general awareness that no matter what we do, we are Congress or the state legislature. No matter how you do it, you're not going to be able to create clear and concise, totally understandable legislation. It's just not going to work. So because clear and concise doesn't work in terms of legislation, you've got to allow the bureaucrats to use their discretion. It's not good or bad, it's just a necessity. It just has to be like this. There's no option. Does that make sense to you? Congress, the state legislature does not have an option. It is not within its, with the elected officials and the legislative branch of government do not have the capacity to make clear and concise legislation that covers all the bases. It's just not possible. It's not. They're not incompetent. Well, some of them might be, but that's beyond where I'm going. It's not incompetence. It's just they're not experts. So because they're not experts, they leave it up to the experts to make the rules. Here, you guys go do it. That makes sense to me. I'm good to go with that. Now, does anybody have a question? I'll wait. It's an agonizing moment for you because you want to leave. Oh my
Can
God.
you speak a little bit about this part again, please?
Huh?
Can you speak a little bit about this part again? What
Okay.
would be the idea?
Anything in your introduction, any term that you use, like rules,
But certainly it will be in class discussion too.
yeah, but you don't have to, anything in here that you're going to talk about, just list it up
Okay.
here. I don't care what it is, just list it up there. Does that make sense? So whatever you're going to talk about, just list it. Okay?
And do a definition, giving a definition.
Yes, please.
In class, we discussed the legislative branch. When we get to part B, could we talk about like a few of the models?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfectly fine with me.
Okay. Sure.
Knock yourself out.
Okay, so let's do this an example.
Okay.
Explain.
Anybody else? And once again, if you want me to see drafts of stuff, just send it to me, okay? Okay, if nobody's got a question, I vote we leave. Looks like we're leaving. Awesome.